Welcome to our first episode of Coffee and Comms. I'm Justin Graney with North Carolina Emergency Management, and I'm joined today with Mr. Greg Hauser, who is our statewide interoperability coordinator and our communications branch manager. Greg, welcome to the coffee time.
Hey, thanks, Chief. I appreciate you, and I'd like to welcome everybody and thank the audience for watching, taking some time out of their day or night or whatever it may be for some coffee with comms. So thanks in advance, guys.
Well, Greg, I'm seeing a lot of unfortunate events that have taken place in our country of late. High impact events, tragedy, multi-agency responses. And I look at a lot of the news coverage and a lot of the after action reports, and a lot of it always says comms is a failure. There was an issue with comms. The radios didn't work. We weren't on the same channel. The cell phones didn't work. Notification systems didn't work. What's your take on that, since you oversee that for the state?
Yeah, so good point, right? I think everyone who's watching or listening remembers a time or an incident where they have been on, or an event, something like that, where there was just some difficulty making that connection between one responder and another, or the incident command structure and folks coming into that event or that incident. So I've been a part of a few where the after action report just screamed out issues with communications. I'm going to give kind of a different spin to it. I don't buy that. I don't buy that communications is an issue. All right. So I'm going to challenge people to dig into that a little bit. What is communications, right? A lot of people think communications equals technology. You mentioned before, my position is the statewide interoperability coordinator, right? So interoperability, it's a big buzzword, has been a buzzword since those high impact events, 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, those types of events where we saw problems with communications. I don't think we can use that as an excuse anymore, right? Communications is not technology. Communications and interoperability is people. I think we're missing the mark, and we're leaving a lot on the table by not really digging into how we communicate. So I know there's a lot of really great response plans, and we exercise these things, but I don't think we really take the time to dig into the hows and the whys of how we communicate during these no noticed high impact events. So take an active violence situation, for example. It's easy for us to get into the mindset of, well, we're going to go down to the local school or the mall, we're going to do an exercise. Well, what channel are we going to be on, right? Meaning radio channel. Oh, we're going to be on Events 8 or TAC 11. Okay, cool. Do you know how to get to that channel? Nah, we'll hook up with the comms guy when we get there, or somebody will tell us when we get on scene.
Yeah.
Right? So we need to be methodical about how we train, how we exercise, really dig into the how. So I urge the audience, if you have a plan for these types of events and it says, contact so-and-so, or contact emergency management, or contact Red Cross, walk that motion. Actually do that. Contact them. How are you going to do it? Am I going to use the phone? Am I going to text? Am I going to use a radio? Dig into those things. Those are the easy pieces that don't involve technology, or it's technology that we're using every day.
Well, planning is definitely important for any high impact event, whether it be hurricanes, acts of violence, anything large scale, cyber disruption of critical government services. And you talked about, reaching out and, actually doing the things. So that's more than just sitting around a table talking about it. You're actually saying, key up that radio and call somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the communications piece of our planning and exercises goes kind of unfinished. Right, so it's always assumed that the radio is going to work, or everyone is going to be there, or the hardware is going to work properly, right? Or it's going to be assumed that I'm going to be able to use my cellular device during a high-impact event. I'm here to tell you guys, when those high-impact events happen, those things are not going to work. You should put that in your planning process to say, what happens nowadays when we have a high-impact event at a mall or a school? Everyone's going to get on their smart device, and they're going to start live streaming. They're going to start calling their families, texting, whatever that is, to reach out and communicate. We have to anticipate that. We can't be surprised anymore, or else we're going to read on an after action report that communications failed. Right? So I think the advice that I'm trying to give around the fire here is that incident managers executive officers and public safety should expect these things to happen and not change their tactics or operations because it is happening, right? We wouldn't necessarily do that for other failures, say on a fire ground or on a SWAT incident or a barricaded subject or a mass casualty incident, right? Those things tend to happen in a more calm, comfortable environment. So, so some, I guess, some recommendations. I think if you think of radio, so how first responders are dispatched to calls, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes for that, right? So you have a high impact event, no notice event. Where do those calls come from? They come from your 911 center. Do you think they're going to be busy? Yeah, absolutely, right? They're going to be taking, on average, I think the statistic, and I apologize, this may be misquoted, but in my experience, there's over 100 911 calls a minute when these things happen, right? So PSAPs right now are having some struggles with staffing, right? So what does that look like? So you may be delayed right off of the bat. We don't want that to happen, and that's not our goal. Our goal is to get people and equipment out the door as fast as we can to these types of things, but those things are going to be impacted. The basics, right? So I think being methodical about that, and understanding that if I'm normally on a day-to-day basis, on a blue sky day, if I'm a law enforcement officer and I am on my normal district or precinct channel, that may change during a high impact event. So consider, during the exercise or even day-to-day operations, change it to your really bad, the channel that you use on a really bad day. So run calls off of your disaster channel for a couple hours a day. Get in the habit. Same with the fire service. Run a day or run a shift on that events 8 or that whatever that channel is that you use in exercises. Give it a try.
So you're really just normalizing that disaster process.
Yeah, and Chief, honestly, I hate to say it, but I think these things are more prevalent. We can't be surprised if they happen. Unfortunately, here in North Carolina, we don't ever want them to happen, but our positions, we don't shy away from the bad days. We have to be ready for the bad days. So
Absolutely.
So I think the more we are ready for the bad days on the good days, treating a good day as it could be a really bad day. So if we go into shift, wherever you are in North Carolina, if you're showing up for a shift and you're saying to yourself, something bad's going to happen today, let's talk. Let's get around the kitchen table. Let's have a discussion. Let's break a radio out. Or let's say, hey, if I can't use my smart device to call headquarters, what does that look like? You may not have all the answers, but that's okay. Our business is to reach out and be interoperable.
Absolutely. Right? Well, I know in North Carolina that, there's many different radio systems, sure. Different 911 centers or public safety answering points, PSAPs.
Yes, sure.
What happens in a multi-jurisdictional response to a large event? Where do we have something where people can talk?
Yeah, great question. So it depends. So the bottom line is it's going to depend, right? We have the North Carolina Viper system, which is a statewide radio network, and we have a series of shared interoperability talk groups. You may know, if you don't know, they're lettered, so Alpha through Tango now. So, and it is Alpha 1 through 4, Bravo 1 through 4, et cetera, et cetera. You can call the 24-hour watch and get one of those channels, right? But we have to really think, right? We talked earlier about getting methodical. Are you going to have time to do that? So if you have, you're calling all cars, you're having your county's worst day or your agency's worst day, that may not be a good option, right? So I think planning now, part of those discussions is if I'm 2 counties away, we've seen in the past in other states where you see resources from miles and miles away responding in. You're going to have those conversations now. Like if your channel is TAC 8 in your jurisdiction, that bad day channel, or TAC 8, 9, and 10, or whatever that is, you guys are going to know that. How do we share that channel? How do we put technology into play to connect who's coming, right? So if you take and you draw a big circle around your jurisdiction and you say, maybe I ought to have a conversation, or maybe we ought to meet halfway and have some lunch and say, If you were sending law enforcement agencies or fire agencies or EMS strike team or whatever those things look like, how are we going to talk? What will we do? And pull the radios out, turn them on, find common ground now. And if you have questions, write them down. Every agency has that nerd, that geeky communications person who's going to have those agencies. You got to find those people, ask them those questions, and have the conversations, because it might be a very, very simple fix to a super complex issue, or at least you think it's complex, but it's not to those people. I sometimes I talk with my peers all over the state, and you know, I don't say this with any malice, but I think a lot of times we overlook communications or technology as something we can just figure it out. We'll figure it out. We have a relatively smart person on the truck. They're a gadget person. They'll just figure it out. Do we do that for hazmat incidents? Right? So
Yeah.
do we do that for SWAT incidents, bomb-related calls, advanced emergency traumas? We call those experts. If it's a bomb or a suspicious package, we call it, the bomb technicians or the hazardous materials technicians. You get that next level of expertise. We need to find those people now. You need to find those people now. Engage them for these high impact events. You are going to need them. They are going to have to be with you.
I think you take for granted. I mean, I rode a fire truck for many years, and
Sure.
I think I took for granted that the radio system would work. I just
Sure.
assumed it's always going to work. So that was in the back of the mind. My focus was always elsewhere.
Sure.
But I guess the question you got me thinking here is like, if the radio system fails, what is our backup? Is there some sort of planning that needs to occur there?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And these are those things, you want to talk about those things. There are many, many options. And that goes into how you set up templates in your radio, for example. So in my experience, we set up a radio template for which, if that happened, the user could spin either way and have an option. So spin all the way to the end, and you have an option. You can talk, right? And those are those direct channels, those walkie-talkie to walkie-talkie, like just when we were kids and you play, you get Radio Shack walkie-talkies and you talk. So getting back to that and keeping it simple, right? I think, not to get into tactics at all, I don't want to do that, but if you break it down to the least common denominator, I need to take care of myself and my crew straight away. If you start there and then build out, you're going to put the puzzle pieces together, right? So I think it's there. During these complex incidents, it's almost like there's multiple puzzles out there. There's a communications puzzle. If you don't have all the pieces, you're not going to have the answer, right? So I think from our perspective as communications professionals is we have some answers for you. We're not going to have all the answers, but we'll have some ideas for you. And that's the point. We want to be those subject matter experts for these types of events. It may even be you don't want to put your command post there because there is no wireless coverage there. So if you go there, you're not going to be able to talk on your phone to start, let alone when everyone starts using their phones. So
I guess that goes back to pre-planning and knowing your area,
sure,
that of your area responsibility and knowing where your gaps are.
Absolutely. And then you talk about, not to get into this. Hopefully, will be another coffee with comms discussion. Cheers. But how is the public communicating? Right. That's a whole different dynamic in public safety. Right. If our expectation is that the citizens are going to know what's happening before we do. You take a fire station; they're doing their daily activities. Yeah. You're taking a law enforcement; they're working their beat, and then all of a sudden something happens, and then the dynamics start to just fall together. Well, we may be missing a whole different aspect of communicating. So how can we take that and then make it usable for our incident managers or our chief officers? That's a whole complex, different piece of what I do and what we do in the communications world. But maybe that's an angle we can take. Understanding what is happening, being able to use some technology to kind of put all those puzzle pieces together. But again, the more technologically advanced we get, the more resources we need. So it's a huge puzzle. My advice is that people just start to think about the easy things now, because the technology and these events, our adversaries are getting more advanced. And it frustrates me when we're taking our communications piece for granted. That it's just always going to be there. And I appreciate you saying that earlier, because we live in a world where it may not. You know, very, very simple task right now that I know we have gaps in North Carolina is radio programming. So you may have TAC 8 in your radio, but have you ever keyed it up around the kitchen table? Just key it up. Test 1 2. You go. Test 1 2. You go. Test 1 2. You could do one fire station a day. One police district a day. Just, hey everybody, key up. Or during those high stress training environments. So firefighter PPE, or the equipment, the safety equipment that firefighters use. Donning and doffing that equipment. Make a radio exercise when you do that. Mayday training. Incorporate some of those things. Do it in that stressful yet controlled environment. So when you're in stressful, uncontrolled, you have some type of that muscle memory to make it work. Same thing with law enforcement. I was never a law enforcement officer, and I appreciate what the men and women of law enforcement do every day, but you have to qualify on some of that equipment, whether it's a firearm, whatever those things are. Use those opportunities. When you're at the range, do what you have to do at the range, and then make a requirement of go to TAC 7 on your radio. And if you can't do it, you don't qualify it on your weapon. Right?
Interesting.
So I think there's many, many opportunities to incorporate some of these after action report gaps in your daily activity. Right?
I think as a public safety community, we probably underestimate the criticality of that resource, because without communications, any mission, event response, emergency response is going to fail, because as humans, we have to communicate with one another to work.
Sure. I think, you're right on. I think having a conversation is the first part to successful incident-based communications. Right? We have to have human interoperability before we can have any of this work. We're seeing it now.
Fascinating.
We're seeing it now in the IT, in the radio world. Those things are starting to come together. So my advice is, if there's an IT gap and there's a radio gap, let's get those folks at the kitchen table at the fire station. Have some coffee first. Hi, I'm Greg. Nice to meet you. That's a really good first step in completing the entire incident-based communications ecosystem. And if you do that, have those disagreements, because you're going to have disagreements. Come to common ground, because that will move the mission forward.
Well, and we're enjoying coffee together here. It's September, and that's Preparedness Month.
Sure.
Right? So for the non-public safety folks that maybe will watch this, what should they be planning for as they do their disaster kit stuff and visiting readync.gov to have a plan, have a kit? What would you say on planning for communications for them?
Absolutely. I think if we take the approach of being prepared when you cannot connect with your loved ones, being prepared for that, have those conversations within your family, or your loved ones, or your friends, or your neighborhood network, or whoever is accountable for you, or you feel accountable to. Have those conversations. Be real. Again, sometimes we stumble into these really bad situations. Have the conversation of, if I can't get in touch with you for X amount of time, whatever you're comfortable with, what do we do? People react differently when an emergency finds them, if you will.
Yeah.
Some people want to leave or go. Some people don't know what to do. Some people are frozen with what to do. Some people want to get on social media and try and find out what is happening. Have the conversation now. Listen out, or anticipate word from some type of emergency services or emergency management, and believe them. A lot of times when we get those emergency messages, it's kind of what do I do? Like, I want to cruise social media and find out what's actually happening. If you receive those messages, please believe them. Understand that there are a lot of smart people sending those messages. And then take care of yourselves. Teach the younger generation folks that may not understand or know how to communicate without a smart device. Talk about that. Similar to a fire safety plan, where are we going to meet after we get to a safe place? is it safe to leave? Very complex, and it is very scary when we are isolated from communications. I know, just personally, I know my mood changes. If I can't use my smart device and I'm disconnected, my mood immediately changes. We have to tell ourselves across, public safety, the general public, everyone, if your mood is changing when something different is happening, your response is going to change. So you may think that you have a plan on what you do, but my advice is turn off your phones and then actually have that conversation. Leave your phone off for a couple hours. Do that in the firehouse. It will change your mental status. It will change how you make decisions. So try it.
Well, Greg, I appreciate your time and the coffee this morning.
Yes,
And
Chief Rainey, thank you, sir.
And for those watching, please visit readync.gov and prepare today and include communications as part of your disaster preparedness. Thank y'all.